All right, everyone, welcome to our journey. I am Stephen Sokoler, and we are here to explore the mental and emotional well-being practices of interesting people making a difference in the world. And today I'm here with my buddy, Michael Farber, founder of Breakout. And Breakout is a community of changemakers that I've been proud to be a member of for the last, a bunch of years, right?
Hi, 4.
4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Well, thank you for being here. Good to see you. How you doing
Likewise.
today?
Doing all right. Feeling good.
Yeah?
Especially, feel like I'm at a good oxygen level.
Yeah, they gave you the high mic.
Yeah, the high mic, it's important. Yes.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So let's get started. How'd you end up here today? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Gotcha. So not literally, how did I end up here in this moment?
City bike.
City bike. Train just came from Harlem, actually. Yeah, I mean, I guess like everyone's journey, it's a lot of doors that you didn't think were going to open, and you followed them down the way. But the quick is, started a company called Breakout 5 years ago with my co-founder, Graham Cohen, who you know, and have been in the startup space for about 10 years. So I wasn't a founder of the predecessor company I was a part of, but was on the founding team, and was certainly an entity or very much felt in a way like I was a founder, just because of the bandwidth and things that we were allowed to create within it. So for the past 10 years, in some way, shape, or form, I've been in building community in different professional and personal spaces. So the past 5 years with Breakout, really in a way started with the fact that the previous 5 years, I was building events and media content in the real estate space.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about Breakout. How would you describe it?
Yeah. So, the big thing with Breakout is, on the surface, we create events, we create original content out of a for-profit entity, and then we do funding on a nonprofit. But on a fundamental kind of like mission level, the big thing for us is we want to make, we live in a celebrity culture, right? And we've been very privileged and fortunate to do events in cities around the country. And for us, the modern day celebrity is these change makers, it's these impact makers that are really lifting up their community. So for us as a company, we say we champion change makers, and we like to say we give a voice to those oftentimes that are underrepresented.
And what was the impetus for starting this 5+ years ago?
The word breakout originally was just like getting out of your comfort zone and bubble. Living in New York City, I mean, we're very lucky that we can meet with people from all different walks of life. But at the end of the day, we're all pretty serious, busy people trying to build whatever we're building. And so if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in finance, if you're in fashion, it's hard to, find time to meet with people outside of your discipline. So the initial idea was just like, let's just shake stuff up. There's a lot of amazing things we can learn from one another. And if you bring together like-minded people who are excited about change, they're going to find ways to work with one another. So that was kind of the initial kernel behind it.
And how has it evolved over the last 5 years? Obviously, as with many businesses, things change. I'm sure you as a person have evolved quite a lot, and we'll talk about that. And then, of course, the society we're living in is quite different now than it was 5 years ago because of lots of reasons.
Yeah, no, I mean, things have changed, definitely externally and internally. We've had different reasons for, our evolution. I would say within the first year of building Breakout, there was 3 events that happened that were very fundamental, and I believe you came on the 4th event we ever did. But we went to New Orleans in the fall of 2014, which was our second event we ever did, and it was like the first event was like we went to Miami. It was winter time, and we were just like, let's just bring people together. It was an amazing event, but it was very simple. We didn't have a lot of time to really prep it. The second event we did in New Orleans, we were just through friends meeting individuals who were entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, educators. Many of them had come to New Orleans with TFA, which is Teachers for America, after Hurricane Katrina, and they had stayed. And they had stayed because they were like, we are drawn to this community, we want to be a part of it, and we want to be a part of the rebuild. And so I was like, great, you got to share your story during the weekend. And they were like, for sure, but you should also meet my friend who's not a transplant, who's been here their entire life. Their story is maybe one that like hasn't been heard and maybe like better to be heard. And it was kind of like, okay, that's a good point. So our second event was much more of kind of what it looks like today, which is more immersive throughout a city. And we were scratching the surface of kind of these like homegrown stories. So we were fortunate that someone who was working for Quicken Loans from Detroit came on that trip and was like, you have to go to Detroit. I don't know what you're hearing. And to give context, at that point, Detroit had just was going through the largest bankruptcy in American history for a city. There's like 50,000 abandoned homes, people not being able to pay for their water bill, all this crazy stuff you're reading, but you're also reading about a little resurgence. So we went there in the middle of like a snowstorm, and you go downtown and it's like kind of looked like a little post-apocalyptic. You just didn't even see anyone anywhere. And every story we met that weekend was just someone who was thinking outside the box and a way to impact their community. And if New Orleans had started shifting our mindset, Detroit blew it right open and was like, these are the stories that matter. If we have this opportunity to bring together these great entrepreneurs from around the country, what better way to truly break them out of their bubble than bringing them into places that are inspiring, but they might have a different perception of, and then make like the program really be all about these change makers whose stories you can't just hear on an everyday basis. We really had to do, I think it was about 6 or 7 months of community work to create that event and create that trust. And the event after that was Baltimore, and I think you came on that. Yep. And while we were doing our Detroit event, the riots happened, which people in Baltimore take a lot of umbrage to the word riots because they would say it's the uprising and a lot of race relation issues and tension around even that. But I'm from right outside of Baltimore, and I was like, man, I never thought I could stop people going to Baltimore. I love the place, but it's always spoken of in such a terrible way. But at that point, I realized, wow, it's like if we say this is our mission and we want to spotlight these great individuals doing well by their community, we have to go to Baltimore. And so, the rest is kind of history for us on all the cities we've done in our mission, but those few events were like, that was the shift on, what mattered to us.
Cool. And Baltimore was still probably 3-4 years ago, right?
Oh yeah, it was 2015.
So how have things evolved since then?
Sure. Well, I think for one, it's somewhat coming into our own. So it's something I'm very proud of, but when we look at just the makeup of who's attending our events at this point, we've always been pretty good about gender parity. I think that was something we accomplished pretty early on, but our diversity numbers were pretty bad. The funny thing is, they were pretty good in the scheme of other conferences, but in the scheme of most things, diversity numbers are bad. And we're going into places where we're usually, we're like sometimes the only white faces, and we're asking people to trust us and open up their doors and make introductions. And then, slowly but surely we were doing better in diversity, but you're going into places where 60, 70, 80% of the population is people of color, and you're coming in and it's, almost the reverse of that. It was something that we were working very hard to fix, but there was a lot of trust that needed to happen, not just from the community, but also even just people of color attending our events and feeling like it was like a true and safe space to be in, and not just a space where we're talking maybe about certain issues of race and feeling like they're being carted out as the people of color to explain to all the white people what's going on. So that, I would say, has been one of our biggest growth periods, and quite frankly, why a lot of times when I think about my entrepreneurial journey, it's really the biggest thing has been my journey with race. And so that's something we've really challenged ourselves, but is probably like one of our proudest measures. So, Philadelphia, you were just at, we were looking at the numbers, and I think we were about 60% people of color, 53% on kind of the female-male ratio. And then something we talked about off camera, but this was, we had a few people that that were in wheelchairs and a few other things. And, that's certainly an area that we're looking to improve upon, even in just the way we design the events. Because even going through that, things that we thought would just be kind of things we had handled or would be prepped, life is not, we don't do a good job as a society in those areas. So I think for us, we're always trying to push the envelope on, when we think of inclusion and equity and how that's represented in our platform.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always appreciated. Like, I think from the get-go, or at least since I've been involved, you guys have been working hard on diversity when it comes to race. But it was so much more than that in this last trip when you saw able-bodied, whether it came to sexual orientation, just bringing people together really in a much more representative way. So
right.
I think that's That's wonderful. Because like you said, a lot of communities talk about it, but it's like, oh, we're at 10% or we're at 20% versus 60 or 70% and really looking at it more holistically.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a lot of like self-work and a lot of like unlearnings from the things that we just have thought were fine in our process. And so it's just, you always have to kind of push a bit harder. And the thing for us at the end of the day, the more representative we are, it's just the better our events are. I mean, it's just so clear to everyone, their enjoyment, the richness of the conversation, the way people collaborate. It's just better. So, it's not something we ever want to like trivialize or tokenize and they're like, oh, we need to do this because it truly is just what it should be. So something we think about a lot.
Beautiful. So I want to talk a little bit more about Breakout, but you mentioned the self-work that you've done. You want to give us a little peek into that, whether that's around race, whether that's around really anything. You want to share some of the practices or things that you've picked up or some of the things that you've worked with along the way?
Yeah, so for sure. So definitely the biggest self-work I've done is around race. And because I've already said it a few times, but it's really almost like more unlearnings than learnings. I mean, we have so much structural bias in the way of just systemic racism and all these different things that are just, the New York Times Magazine just came out with their 1619 project, which is around the 400 years of slavery and Jim Crow and all the other things. And it's just like, these things we weren't taught in the right way, or we weren't taught at all. Or some of us were, maybe potentially if they were lucky or fortunate. But, there's just been a lot within conversations and language and understanding, and also being someone who's had a lot of success and privilege in my life and having that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I know someone, or, oh, I have an idea, and ensuring I check some of those kind of knee-jerk impulses to try to be a better listener. I've always been definitely a big doer, but that's another part I've had to really work on in a big way. I've done a lot of just writing, not necessarily writing I publish, but I found writing to be a really important just practice for me post trips that I've been on. It's definitely like I didn't think about it at the time, but it's definitely meditative. But just helps me just put things into clarity. But yeah, I would say that's been a big thing. And also just, putting myself, what I've tried to do in a big way is under promise and over deliver. So for me, where that translates a lot to is if at any point I'm in a new city or new community and I'm offered up a chance to go and, be in a space, I drop everything to make sure that I do that, because I think a lot of times we're always so busy. We're like, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do that. But what especially happens, especially with me being like a white man, is I'm this fast talking New Yorker and I'm going into Detroit or going into Baltimore and I tell people, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And so often someone like me has not done anything. So I like trip over myself to show up to things and really try to create a level of trust. But also not over promising, because there's a lot of ways that good intention can be actually sometimes more destructive. Yeah. And, especially when it comes to race, sometimes there's a lot of conversations around the fact that sometimes, at least with someone who's bigoted, where they stand, whereas someone could be this like really educated person, but doing like highly problematic stuff. So not saying I'm perfect, but there's an author right now, Ibram Kendi, who has this whole thing about being like an anti-racist. And so his whole point is like, he's like, I'm one of the most educated and like scholarly people in this subject, but no one's not racist. You're either a racist or you're anti-racist. And he's like, even in my things, I've seen that I've done stuff wrong. So it's something I've kind of newly internalized because he's a new person I'm following. But I think that's the way I just try to analyze a lot of the things I'm doing, knowing that it's okay. I'm going to trip and fall and make mistakes. But being nimble to the process, and also being like really thankful that so many people have like welcomed me into this process, because me building this platform just does not happen without just like so many people. I mean, it'd be crazy for me to be just like, I did this, like this is me.
It's all me.
It's all me. It's like none of this is me. Like every single thing we've done, I can point to so many people. So gratitude's a whole long thing, but I am very grateful to a lot of people.
So you mentioned a lot of different practices in there, whether that's writing or just the general awareness practice or listening or just the end gratitude. You mentioned the unlearning of things. Was that through reading? Was that through conversations? Were there any mentors that shaped you? How did you, or actually even to take it one step before that, how did you even realize that you needed to unlearn certain things?
So my business partner and I always joke about this, but when we were in Detroit on that first trip, a few, people were obviously excited for us, more like the powers that be, like kind of like corporate foundation philanthropy groups were really excited about us. But we're meeting with just on the ground, just small business owners or artists or writers, and a lot of people were pretty frosty with us, and they were just like, "I don't get it. Why are you here? Like, what are you doing?"
Right, two white guys show up.
Yeah,
So handsome.
so handsome. But no, it just just being like and it wasn't that it was shocking per se, but everyone was just like, we don't want any of this. We don't want you just immediately shutting things down. And even though I think I wasn't like shocked that people would feel a certain way, I think the depths of it, I think, were a bit newer to me, and that just spoke to a lot of privilege, quite frankly. And so I was like, wow, if we're going to actually do right by these programs we're saying we're going to do, it's just like a lot of reading we need to dive into, and whether that was history, whether that was going to town halls, whether that was showing up at events. So I've learned a lot from reading, but nothing has been more educational than just like, sitting on a stoop with someone or sitting in someone's store, meeting someone for coffee and just like hearing someone's story. Those are always those are the things that stick with you. Those are like the life-changing kind of moments that, reading and history, all that stuff is great. But for me, those have been the most formative.
Beautiful. So let's go back a little bit. So this was something that you started working on 5 years ago, but the seeds were planted kind of well before that. Let's go back to childhood. What were your dreams? What were your aspirations? Where did you think you'd be at this time in your life?
I don't know what I would have exactly thought, but what I will say is, so my mom's an immigrant from Bolivia. So we have some family that are Bolivian, some family from Spain on my mother's side, and my father's side's like Italian American, but my mother's side's like the close-knit family unit we grew up. She came here when she was like 12 or 13. So that's like the side that was very formative in my growth. And our family talked politics all the time. So there was always a lot of debate around issues and people and geographies, and some domestic, some international. So I probably thought in some way, shape, or form I would be working in like government or some sort of policy, or maybe even being a lawyer. And so those were definitely the things I thought of. I would say a lot. Just our family's always had definitely a very strong, almost like conscience around just like things that are right and wrong.
Do you speak to your family about the work you're doing?
I do. It's so funny. So my parents, they definitely are fans, but I think it's something in the sense of like, my mother is a teacher. She's an ESOL teacher, was English as a second language, and she does it outside DC. I think there's somewhere with the fact that it's entrepreneurial, there's almost like, she's just like, I know what you're doing and it seems really great. And you're like, are you okay? It's like that parent thing, It's like they care, but the biggest thing they care about is just like, you're okay. And I think that's something that'll never go away. So we don't have I would say we don't dive into the depths, but they read everything that comes out on us. They watch all our films. I know they're deeply proud. But I think it's just different generations. And then my father's just like a old school sales guy. So he always wants to know business plans.
Appreciates the hustle.
Yeah.
So you mentioned films there. That's obviously a new and important and exciting part of the Breakout story. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think early on, just like a lot of people, I like content, but realized early on that just a lot of the stories in the space that are done, the second something's labeled like impact, it suddenly becomes a bit of a sob story, and it just a lot of times is you certainly feel emotional about it, but it's never done in a way that really like celebrates the individual. It's just more about like this terrible thing that happened, how they overcame it, great. And we wanted to create content that, of course, told the story, and you can't hide the facts. But we wanted to showcase the people that we're meeting like the stars that they are. So we've done 3 short films. Our last 2, I would say, are like, the first one was like super, like no budget, super trial. The last 2, though, are starting to get some film festival awards. So the first event, or the last film we did, was Hummingbirds in the Trenches, on our friend Kanwani Fidel. He's a writer in Baltimore. He gained a bunch of attention. I think it was in 2015 or 2016, from a short story he wrote that was like, I'm going to butcher it, but it's how a black boy has been dying in Baltimore since age 10. And so Ava DuVernay, the filmmaker, and all these people were like tweeting about it. He got a ton of love. He got like millions of impressions. And he actually came to an event we did in Baltimore. A foundation in Baltimore funded a few artists and authors to come to our event. He was one. And we're just like, man, this guy's incredible. And then you start talking to him and hearing things about his life story, and just his mom's battling fentanyl addiction. His dad's been in and out of prison. He's still living at home in East Baltimore, and he has a lot of money issues because he hasn't still figured out like the way to monetize his work. Meanwhile, though, his quotes are all over Baltimore schools, and he's a star there. He's on the Baltimore Sun all the time. He's in the Washington Post. He's on local news. And so what's been really cool about this film, that was in this Amazon Film Festival. It's going to be in this Social Change Festival this fall, and it's been a few other places. But he's now speaking internationally. He's starting to get paid more for his work, and he gets to show it everywhere he goes. And when you watch the film, you're like, man, this guy's a superstar, which he is. But that's what we want to do with these films, is continuously, amplify, these changemakers' voices.
And you have a new film.
We have a new film. Do I have time to talk about?
Boom, boom, yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. So yeah, we're super pumped about this film. Our friend Leon Ford, he's an activist from Pittsburgh, and unfortunately, he's had many moments in his life that changed him. But the focal one in 2012 was he was pulled over by the Pittsburgh police. They thought he was a guy named Lamont Ford. Anyway, he ended up being shot by the police 5 times. He ended up being paralyzed from the waist down. The police tried throwing him in prison. It was this whole crazy saga. He ended up winning a settlement with the police. But you meet Leon today, he's like the most smiley, warm, just like infectious personality. And he's been on the cover of a bunch of different stories. He's been celebrated for the activism work and the voice he has in Pittsburgh. And you go to Pittsburgh, he is like the de facto mayor. Guy can't go anywhere. I was at dinner with him. He was interrupted like 10 plus times. But so we went to do this film on him because he was running for city council. And we didn't, we're not a political organization, but we just want to tell his story. But we're like, this will be exciting, and we can just show like what he's going through. And the second scene we filmed, and spoiler, because we haven't announced it yet, but he basically had a therapy session, and we didn't know how the scene was going to look. But he basically had a transformative therapy session in the second scene we filmed. And came out with this sense that he basically felt like he had been a fraud the past few years, not in what he was saying, but to himself, that he was being so strong for everyone else but himself, and he had never dealt with the trauma. He'd really been through his whole life, not just the shooting. That was just a piece of it. And if he was really going to be the example and the leader that he wanted for his community, he had to heal himself first. And so, he's dove deeper into therapy since then, and he dropped out of the race 2 days later. So people in Pittsburgh still are like, what happened? Why did this guy drop out? And it will be shown in this film that we're releasing this fall. But it's his mental health journey. And as he said, it's the most courageous thing he's ever done.
Wow. So let's talk about mental health a little bit. Obviously, you, just as a human being living in this world and being an entrepreneur and wanting to show up as a friend and a son and a partner and everything else, like you're living life, right? And you have the pressures and stresses that we all do, and you're doing serious work and doing it in a thoughtful, serious way. So what are the practices that you incorporate into your life to stay mentally and emotionally balanced?
Yeah. So my girlfriend would be yelling right now saying I need to go to therapy, which I have not done. And
We could talk about that.
and she's a therapist, but I can't get it from her. um, it's interesting. I kind of alluded to some of the things before, but everyone just assumes I'm an extrovert because so many things I do are forward facing and social, but I'm definitely not an introvert per se, but I skip out on a lot of big events because it's too draining for me. So I definitely have certain methods of just like the time and space I give to myself. Reading and writing for me, I find a lot of just kind of solace within that. And then I do just like a lot of personal, like kind of just exploring wherever I am, whether that's just taking bike rides, walking around, just getting to, for me, I love being in tune with whatever place I'm in and really understanding where I'm living. And I don't know, to me, that's always like the most like reinvigorating time I have, because that walking around by yourself or biking around with yourself it must be some sort of meditative thing, because it's like always when I'm not trying to think about anything, that some of the best stuff comes to life. So yeah, just giving myself space and doing a much better job of saying no to things.
Boundaries. Yeah, it's important. What does your girlfriend say about therapy?
Oh, she wants me to get, she every single day is like, when are you going to therapy?
And you say, tomorrow?
Tomorrow. It's going to happen. Yeah, she's a therapist working specifically with kids who experience trauma. So, she's very deep down the well of that. And I mean, I'm a fraud I in the sense of like, I should have already done it for all the people around me that have done it. Because, I can rationalize in my mind saying, well, I haven't been through any traumatic experiences. I'm stressed like anyone else, but I'm very privileged and I'm very comfortable. And I have, if something failed, I have a family and friends that I can fall behind on. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why people go to coaching and therapy and do these things. It's not about extinguishing like what's going wrong. It's almost just like ensuring that your well-being, especially for a time when something might go wrong, right?
Yeah, it's preventative.
It's preventative, yeah.
So what's holding you back?
I've definitely at times said, well, I need a coach before a therapist, because in my mind, the things that are most stressful to me is really my business growth. Things outside of it, I don't feel really stressed at all. It's my number one stress. So I've always thought, but I guess you could make the point, well, you could have both.
It's like I can't go to the gym until I go on a good diet. And, well, since I can't go to the gym right now, I may as well just have the ice cream sundae because, why not, right?
Right.
Well, if you're interested, happy to share his info so you could check him out.
There we go.
Cool. Anything else that you want to share? This has been great to hear about what you're up to, what's happening with Breakout, lots of exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share?
No, not really. We're just trying to figure it out one day at a time and trying to be our best selves. So I guess therapy's calling.
Yeah. Last question. As you move through this interesting life, this human experience that we're all going through, if you could have one travel companion with you on this journey of life, who would that be? Real, fictional, alive?
Well, if I don't say my
dead?
girlfriend, I'll be crushed for this.
Oh, you could say like Tupac or something, and she'd understand.
You
Or
need to
could
give
say,
you need
like,
you need to give the delineation that it can't be someone you're in a relationship with.
Okay, so anyone except
Okay.
your
Because
girlfriend.
it obviously would be my girlfriend.
You're like, actually, my ex.
Gosh, I don't know. I've never had anyone. Who would be yours?
I really like the idea of the Buddha. Like, he had a cool life.
Right.
He was obviously deeply wise. So I think there would be a lot there.
It's really interesting. Have
It
you
could
ever?
also be like the shorter version is like the who would you have dinner with, but this is more like who would you kick it with for an extended period of time.
Did you ever read the book The Razor's Edge?
No.
It's like a book from like I don't know when it takes place in like the 20s before the Depression happens. When you read it, it feels like very like present today. But the coolest person to basically be around back in the day was basically writers. They were like the modern day celebrity of like who you could be with. But I would say if it had to be like an archetype, less of a person, it would definitely be some sort of like provocateur writer type person who just at all times could be just waxing poetic about whatever we came across.
Cool. But if it couldn't be them, then your girlfriend.
My girlfriend, and then Tupac.
Yeah. Beautiful. Michael Farber from Breakout. Great having you here, brother.
Likewise.
Thanks.